Namaste. Welcome to Satsang today. Today doesn't seem to be a day that I want to do much talking, so we'll see how we get on today. We've been reading from my own books on the Monday Satsangs, and today we're going to start this last one, The Story of I. And it's a very thin book. It's really meant for, in addition to your practice, your inquiry, your meditation, to just supplement, really, to give an overview of the journey. And it really is, I suppose, as it says in the title, the story of I and the stages that the sense of I goes through on the way. That perhaps some of them you may not even be conscious of yet, but hopefully you can recognize your own sense of I somewhere in this story, and maybe see the road ahead a little bit clearer. So I'm going to, they're very short chapters, literally sometimes just a couple of lines. And I'm going to read it through in its entirety once, and then perhaps we'll come back to look at, after each chapter, there are some contemplation points to help you assimilate and come to understand each chapter. So we may come back and read some of those contemplation points, or if after I finished, if you have a certain section you want me to talk about more, if you have the book itself. So just we'll go through it once the first time, which won't take long, because I said it's not a thick book, it's not a war and peace, it's to guide your inquiry. So we'll see what happens. I'm not sure how this is going to unfold, but we'll go with it. So we'll start with the introduction. This is really not about me. It is about you and all of us. This book is an autobiography of the self, if such a thing could exist. Read each chapter and contemplate it before going on to the next. Each chapter is designed to deepen your realization of the self, and as such, the book is written in stages or steps. You may have noticed some of these stages in your own understanding. In addition to your own self-inquiry and practice, this book can provide vital contemplation points to aid in your discovery of what you really are. At times it will seem to contradict itself and not make sense, as with everything in life. The true I that I speak to in you understands already. I am just reminding you. At the end of each chapter, there are some contemplation points listed. It's advised that you spend some time pondering these points, as they are designed to help you further your understanding and aid in the full realization of what you are. There is also some space after each chapter left for you to write any notes or insights from your contemplations. There is no final answer to each contemplation, but simply an ever-deepening sense of knowing and clarity. So this came up yesterday in the intensive, this looking for an end point. And if we're reading such a book to try to get to the end, then perhaps we can orient ourselves a different way, in hoping that with each chapter and insight becoming clearer, understanding coming from the inside out, aided by the contemplation, that there is no final seeing, there is no shift that is going to be the last one. There's just going to be an ever ongoing series of clearer and clearer understandings that leave your mind and body in a different place. They just wash away even more ability to believe in illusion and to live from that. So if we just stop right now waiting for this end point, you can actually start to begin the journey, to enjoy the journey itself, rather than trying to get to a finish line, which I only did for about 20 years, but apart from that, not too long. So chapter 1 is, at first, I was simply the unborn awareness self. I was everywhere present, and yet nowhere in particular. I was all, and all was in me. There was no growth, no expansion or transcendence. There was only me. I could not perceive myself, as I was everything and everywhere, and there was no reference point to be able to look back on at myself. I could not experience myself, as I was the only thing in existence, and there was no time. I did not know I existed, and I did not know anything at all. I could not think. I was all. So it's important as we go through these chapters to recognize that nothing that anyone writes, especially me, is going to be absolutely true. Nothing that we put into dualistic language is going to be absolutely true, and it will be full, like any authentic teachings, with contradictions and paradoxes. And any teaching is not meant to to describe accurately what you are, but merely to point to and aid your own investigation, your own seeing. So if you're listening to some of this and it sort of comes up inside you, hang on a minute, last week she said this, it's probably true, I am contradicting myself completely, but we'll just have to go with it. Chapter 2. Then a human body appeared in me, and inside this body I realized that I exist here. I realized that I am. With the coming of this body, I knew that I was, and I could think, I am. I was existence itself, and that was all I knew. I knew I am. I thought to myself, I am here. There was perception of my existence. So something's changed here when a human body appears. In chapter 1, it says here, I could not perceive myself, as I was everything and everywhere, and there was no reference point to look back at myself from. So if you can imagine somehow as if you were looking from everywhere, every atom of the universe at once, and before the universe even existed, there was just the unborn awareness. And if you were looking from every point that's possible at once, how would you mirror back upon yourself? How would you come to recognize yourself? Where would be the reference point to look from if you're looking from everywhere all the time? Could you perceive yourself? Could you experience yourself like that? And then in chapter 2, there suddenly a human body appears, and suddenly thought is possible. Suddenly I can think about myself with this human body, and I can perceive now that I exist. I can recognize that I am here, and there is a sense of existence. And it becomes possible then to recognize there is a reference point, there is a location from which I can think about myself, and I can reflect upon myself. Chapter 3. Then I saw this human body, and I recognized that I am this body. I realized I am this body, and my attention saw this first thing. This body was the first object that had appeared, and I felt joy in identifying with this new thing in my awareness. Over time, I learned to value other things and to search for them. I began to value other thoughts, such as thoughts about myself, my body, thoughts about my life, and much more. I began to define myself and my world by only the things that I could see. My belief that I am this body became very firmly established as I was fascinated learning how to move this body and what it could do. I could use it to experience my world. A collection of thoughts began to grow inside my head. These were thoughts that I thought so often that I began to call them my mind, as it felt safe to me. I began to know myself as the body and all the things that I called mine. These things became highly valued, such as my family, my mind, my likes and dislikes. When I learned to value things, I soon forgot about my no-thing awareness self. And when this body died one day, I seemed to disappear too. I had forgotten about my real self and that this body appeared in me. More bodies came and went, and each time I thought that I was this body and that I was coming and going, being born and dying each time. So chapter 3, upon the appearance of a human body, you can imagine, maybe some of you even remember, some people do, a sense of joy and exploration that comes with the body, which you can see in a newborn baby. There's this joy of exploration and learning how to make this body work, and how we learn to fixate on a particular object. If we're the subjectivity itself in chapter 1, and then the body appears in chapter 2. In chapter 3, we're learning to perceive things through the body, and the body is the first thing, the first object. And then the next set of objects that are valued are my thoughts that are happening in this body. And these become called mine because they seem to belong to the body. And this idea arises in thought, in my mind, that I am this body. And if my attention then is trained upon objects, trying to recognize objects, I'm perceiving my world, my family, perhaps the people who are caring for me, objects around me, and I'm starting to notice thoughts and things like that, emotions, then it's quite possible and easy for me to forget my own subjectivity, my own insubstantialness, my pure awareness, unborn self, if attention is focused upon the body and the thoughts and the things that are happening to it and in it. And you can imagine that there is also this whole world of sense experience that comes as a child, tastes and smells and colors and things that seemingly are brand new to us, and we are experiencing them as if for the first time. So as the identification deepens with the body in this chapter, so does the sense of coming and going with the body. If my attention is trained to recognize phenomena and objects, then I'll forget my no-thingness, my awareness self, seemingly, and I will seem to disappear when the body goes. I won't be able to recognize the subjectivity that is my truest self. And when the body goes, I will seem to go, because the I then has taken on the shape of thoughts only, an entity of thoughts and feelings and emotions that I call myself, along with the body, and it becomes deeply established as what I really am. So we'll move on to chapter 4. One day I began to feel fear that I would die. I began to notice my body aging and beginning to fail. I saw other people aging and dying, and I began to fear the end of my own existence. Over time, this became stronger and stronger, and over many bodies, this fear eventually became so strong that I could not even really enjoy this current body. So if you're anything like I was, just there was this sense of the end of my existence. Even when I was younger, a teenager, I remember thinking that all this is going to end someday, and I couldn't even really enjoy even at that age, there was always this drive towards something, finding something else. It didn't really seem to make any sense that there was just going to be 70, 80, 90 years and, accumulate as much as I can, have as many nice experiences as I can, and then that's it. It didn't seem, and the question, what's the point of that? It just kept on appearing in my consciousness. And although this is called the story of I, it's not about me, as in Helen Hamilton. It's the story of everyone's I, or the only I there is, that thinks it's separate in everybody. So over time, this became stronger and stronger, and over many bodies, this fear eventually became so strong that I could not even really enjoy this current body. A new thought came to me one day that said, I wonder if this is all there is to existence. I began to question life and existence and to ask if there was more to life than I knew. Over time, I became obsessed with this search and began to look everywhere I could find an answer. Reading books, meditating, all the time consumed by this inner drive to find answers, to find an end to this fear. Life could not simply be about being born, experiencing for a few years, and then dying and it all being wiped out. I began to notice that other people did not feel this drive or seem to have so much fear. Or perhaps they were just better at ignoring it than I was. I tried very hard to get many things that would distract me from my search and my fear, but none of it worked. So again, it's a kind of autobiography of my own personal awakening as well. But I remember this time, and perhaps you have been through similar, where even beginning to get what you want has this hollow emptiness about it, that it's only temporary, that there is something gnawing away at my own consciousness from the inside out, that it was like a virus in the system, an itch I couldn't scratch, or a question mark that was just growing bigger inside, and this sense of angst, this background angst that was just going on my whole existence, to try to find something more. And I don't mean out there, I mean some meaning to something that I didn't seem to currently have. I had no idea what I was looking for at that point, but we'll move on to chapter 5. One day, a new thought came, and it said, I must have come from somewhere. Even if I am only this body, then the succession of bodies and parents must have started somewhere. I must have an origin that was not a body. Suddenly, this thought made a lot of sense. I realized I could not only be this body. I began to see that I am inside this body, and I was wearing this body. It suddenly seemed obvious that I am the I inside the body. I felt a bit happier knowing that I was not only this body, although I noticed that I still needed the body to exist. I had no memories of anything before this body, and I began to feel the dread again. The ever-present threat of non-existence loomed again, so my search continued. Still, I felt I was making progress. I couldn't actually find myself when I looked for me, but I knew that I was associated with this body. So the first kind of breakthrough was really this sense of that I'm not only the body, I'm something experiencing through the body, that the body is a tool or a vehicle that I'm looking through. But because I was still objectifying everything, because I was still identifying with thoughts, because I could only seem to perceive objects and not that great vast beingness in which all of this is arising, the I that I was defining myself was a thought-based entity, and still there was this knowingness that it was going to disappear, or that it needed the body to experience. So the fear is lessening, but still not the final answer here. Chapter 6. Then I had a thought that perhaps it is the same I in all the human bodies. It made sense to me. Everyone else around me seemed to be experiencing birth, life, and death. And during that life, they always called themselves I, just like I did. It suddenly seemed obvious that this I was experiencing life through all the bodies, and it was calling itself a human being each time. It was the same I having experiences, successes, failures, families, joy, suffering, and all of it. It was the same I being born, growing into adulthood, having its own children and aging. And it was the same I that ultimately had to disappear back into the oblivion of death. This made me a little happier because I was in every human, as every human. But still, each human had to die eventually. So there's a deepening of understanding here that the same sense of I is appearing as all of us as human beings. In each human body, this I is convinced it's only existing in that particular location, but it's actually existing everywhere. But it still seems to have this beginning and this end point. And when it identifies with the body, it goes through the whole range of human experiences possible, from the highest to the lowest. But there is a dawning of wisdom at some point that I'm not just in this location, it's the same I speaking through every human body, no matter what it's speaking about. It is that same fundamental I-ness. Chapter 7. One day it occurred to me that everything that existed was being born and dying. Even a cloud had a beginning and an end. It seemed to make sense that everything that had ever existed was coming and going. Perhaps then, existence meant having a start, a duration of lifespan, and an ending that was death. I thought about this a lot, and it seemed that not only human beings had an I in them, but so did the animals too. Birds, reptiles, and even inanimate objects all followed this pattern of existence. It occurred to me that even the universe itself was following this pattern. I realized that what I am is all of creation. I am everything that exists, will exist, and has ever existed in the past. What I am is the whole universe. Suddenly I could see that I was everything that was manifest. I was everything that was a thing. For a while I felt immense joy and a sense of everlasting existence, for even though this body was bound to die, and I would have to stop experiencing through it, I was eternal after all. I was the first beginning, and I will exist until the last ending. I am all of time. Life itself was what I am. I am everywhere that anything exists, and experiencing life through each thing. So there's a opening then in this sense of I that begins to realize it can't just be one thing, because that thing has to come from somewhere. And the same I, that intelligence that's present as a human being, is also present in animals and all species and all inanimate and animate objects as well. And it's limited in its expression by the form. You know, you cannot have a conversation with a sofa. Well, I've never really tried, I should say, but as a human being, it can express itself and talk about itself, whether it thinks it's a separate being or it's realized the fullness of its existence. It doesn't really matter. It can converse about itself. It can think about itself. It can self-reflect this I-ness. Chapter 8. Soon this joy began to fade, and the restlessness that I had before returned. My search seemed not to be finished. Questions began to arise, and I asked myself, if I am all that exists and I am constantly coming and going, Where then do I originate from? It seemed clear to me that everything must be coming out of something that was else or other to me. It seemed to me that there must be some source of existence, or nothing could arise and have an existence at all. For a while I was more confused than ever. My search deepened, and I saw that this body, this mind, and all bodies and minds, all creation came from a source that was not coming or going. I began to notice a silent space of awareness that was simply here. I could not classify it as existing or not existing because it had no ending or beginning. Perhaps this was the end of my search. Finally, I'd found something that was permanent and not subject to change. It was the unmanifest and pervaded all of existence. It was the awareness self that is the source of all existence. I was overjoyed with happiness, but the question still remained of how this affected me. I became intensely curious about this awareness self, and over time, I began to see that this awareness is what I am. It seemed obvious finally that I was the one looking at all of existence. I could not see comings and goings if I was myself coming and going. Suddenly, existence itself seemed like a dream. I could not be that which was coming and going. Even if I was, there must be something more permanent than that I am also. So the realization dawned in this section, in this chapter, that so far, that even if something is coming and going, it must be arising out of a source, something prior to it that is not coming and going. Over time, I became established in the realization that I was the unmanifest source of existence, and that all existence was coming out of me. So you'd think that would be the end of it, but apparently not. Chapter 9. Soon an itch began to emerge. Something irritated me, and it seemed that my understanding of myself was still not complete somehow. I began to question, how could there be anything other than the unmanifest? Surely anything that arises from my unmanifest awareness self must also be me too. I pondered this deeply, as the manifest and ever-changing world of existence seemed to be completely the opposite of me. It was coming and going, and I was infinitely always. It was growing and changing, and I had never changed. It was happening in time, and yet time happened in me. One day, a realization appeared in me that perhaps the manifest existence of forms was not real. Perhaps it was all only an appearance. Perhaps things being born was simply only a change of appearance, from being invisible and unmanifest to being manifest. Perhaps nothing was actually born at all, and maybe nothing died either, but simply the appearance of it changed back to its original unmanifest state of being invisible and intangible. The more I thought about it, the more joy I felt. I realized that I am allness. I am inclusive of everything, including manifest and unmanifest. I am that place where such division does not abide. I am the place before thoughts, in which thoughts appear and seem to divide myself. Peace at last seemed here. Finally, I could rest knowing myself to be the all. I knew myself to be everything. Nothing, and not limited by those terms and any definition. I am nowhere, everywhere, and beyond. I am inside this body, outside this body, supporting the body, and beyond both definitions. I am beyond all limitations. I was simply the awareness self playing as life, existence, and all that is. yet I remained unchanged by anything. So the dawning of wisdom is really speeding up at this particular stage, that if what I am is the unmanifest self in its unborn purity, that anything that arises out of me, any wave that arises out of the ocean, has to be the ocean. Anything that arises out of the unmanifest self has to be still the unmanifest self, even if it looks like the utter opposite, even if it looks tangible, visible, moving, changing, becoming, beginning and ending. Maybe there are all ways of appearing to be, and yet not actually. Maybe manifestation is simply an appearance that seems to be happening, but has no individual existence of its own. It cannot exist without its unmanifest source. It is the unmanifest source. Just like a mirage in the road, there seems to be water in that mirage. Looks realistic until you get close up to it, and then it disappears. It's not really there in the way that we think it is. 10. Chapter 10. Then one day, I realized that none of this actually happened. I realized that this journey I had been on was only a story. I realized I am only a dream I am having inside the real me, which has always been and will be, and I was happy. I marveled at what a vivid imagination I have. So, throughout all these stages, throughout all of this unfoldingness that's come, these realizations that have happened in thought from chapter 2 all the way through to chapter 10, even the realization that none of this really happened to me, that I've always been the pure unmanifest self and I haven't been through any stages ever. All of that is happening in thought, and nothing has actually happened to the awareness. So did I go on this? Did the I go on this great journey through confusion and back to clarity? Or did nothing happen at all? And can we really say which it is? And would we want to? So I hope you enjoyed that. If you are more confused than ever by reading it, don't worry. It's working its magic without even having to really understand it. And just to want to grasp the content of it will allow that to happen. So I see we have a couple of hands up for questions. I will start first. I have an emailed question which I'm going to answer, and then I'll come to the hands for, next. If you do want to ask a question, there are instructions in the chat box as to how to do that. But very quickly, if you just click on participants section. I'm sorry, I'm having real trouble taking anything seriously today. Participants section, and scroll down to the bottom of the list, and then click on raise hand, and it will allow you to let me know that you want to ask a question. Okay, so I'll go to the email question we have first. It says, Namaste, Helen. My question is following last Monday's satsang about desire. Something started stirring in me. What about if you don't have certain desires? For quite a few years now, I don't have any sexual desires towards my partner, and he seems to be the same towards me. It seems not an issue. I thought it to be a part of my spiritual progression, as well as aging, but perhaps I'm fooling myself. Could you say something about this, please? Although it may not be appropriate to mention this, but last night I did have a dream about having sex with a well-known living guru. This seemed so out of character for me. with gratitude. So I'll say right now, something similar happened to me along the journey. So it's not only you, whoever sent this in. So what about if you don't have certain desires? For quite a few years now, I don't have any sexual desires towards my partner, and he seems to be the same towards me. It seems not to be an issue. I thought it'd be a part of my spiritual progression as well, but perhaps I'm fooling myself. Well, the best way to check if you are fooling yourself is to ask, do I really have any desire that I'm stifling? Do I really have desire of any kind that I'm not allowing? And it's not necessary that we have intense desire, sexual desire, or any particular reason for anything. And it's very common that as our attention is turned inwards, as it says, I thought it was part of the spiritual pathway, that there is a disinterest in things happening in the world, in our world, temporarily at least. But not everyone is moved. Sexual intimacy is just one of the ways that human beings can experience intimacy. We can be intimate on many levels, emotionally and mentally, as well as physically. And sometimes the urge to be intimate is already evolving into an urge to be intimate with all of life, as in the purpose of this book, to be intimate with our own source, to recognize our own source. So if it's not there and you're not suffering that desire, then it's probably just not how you work. That's just not your makeup. But if you ask, am I suppressing any desires, they will be shown to you if you want to see. And really, our spiritual search is for the most intimate way to be in complete and total recognition of what I am. Is the closest word we can get is intimacy in the human language, but it's closer than even that. It's just one. It's being myself authentically. And in that place, there may not be any desire at that point. So it's not uncommon for that kind of sexual desire to diminish or disappear. But if it hasn't been there for a while, perhaps that's just how you are. That's your natural way of being. It doesn't follow that every human being has to have the same wants and desires. And, we can honor ourselves however we're appearing in this moment. And if your partner is the same, then great. It's not going to cause a challenge between you both. It's great to check, am I fooling myself? So it's perhaps a good question to ask. Is there something I'm not seeing? And we can always kind of check in and just recognize if there is something that we're suppressing in that. But my instinct from reading this is that you're just happy the way you are. An ever deepening intimacy on a spiritual level may just reflect as that, or it may not. There is no rule book that says sexual desire has to disappear completely as part of awakening. The way that desire changes as awakening deepens is probably different to what we think. So I can go for a long time without feeling hungry. There's no desire to eat, but then suddenly it's time to eat. And as my body wants to eat, then there's a sense of desire in that moment. And intimacy, physical intimacy, can be the same. There can be no desire for it at all until it's happening. And then there's a desire, there's an enjoyment of it. So it's just a different shift around of, as a separate being, we feel desire for many things all the time. Fulfillment, acceptance, all of that. Intimacy, love, approval. But most often those desires are unfulfilled. So perhaps it's just part of the way you've been. And it's a really good question. I'm sure it'll help many, many people. And the dream, maybe the dream is something very similar happened to me. Slightly embarrassed to say, but there you go. but it really, you know, on waking up from that dream, it was just a sense of, it was some representation of some intimacy with the one being. That's what the guru represented at the time. The real guru is the one being, and as such, that kind of it can be our mind's interpretation of that. Okay, so we'll go to Vidya.
Namaste, Helen.
Hiya, how are you doing?
Yeah, so it's just a sharing.
Don't start me laughing. I'm not going to saboteur. Sorry.
I was actually going to say, don't you laugh, because you keep laughing.
It's just one of those days. I'm really, come on, I'll try my best.
Yeah, it's it's a sharing, and then I guess I might have a question. But yeah, just it was a very powerful satsang, intensive. So thank you for that. And just on waking in that I am sense, there were some questions that came up, just arose, am I safe, and things like that. And then a barrage of thoughts, so many thoughts, and it was really, really intense. And then I sort of said to myself, so you want to bring this back into existence, do you? Because I was watching it for a while. And then all of a sudden a sensation in my solar plexus area was stirring. And I looked at that and I thought, oh, now you've brought up some emotion. But I thought, is it emotion? So I was questioning, is this really true? And what is this? And I couldn't, I didn't know what it was, but then associating it with the thoughts that were there, I started to question, is it really true you can be hurt? Is it really true you feel unsafe? It sort of matched what thoughts were there, but the emotion didn't have any, I didn't know what it was. And then I, you know, just said, oh, you want to come home, you know, come home. So I started to play with it a bit, and then also say, anything else left out there that wants to come back? And honestly, it was just sensations going all through my body. One side of my arm that used to be associated with extreme, or it was a fear. If anyone walked around or lights went on, my body used to go into a shaking. But that hadn't happened for a long, long time. But this time I just had the sensation, but not any emotion or fear. Or there was absolutely nothing. And I wondered whether it was because, well, just before I say that, I noticed all over my body there were just movements of energy, and I couldn't identify any emotion to them. So I wondered whether, because I did question, is it really true I can believe in any of these thoughts? Because as the sensations were going over all the body, there were so many memories popping up of different fragments of different things, which didn't bother me. So I just wondered, could this really be true? Is any of this ever been true? Did anything ever happen at all? So there was just lots of questions. But I wondered whether, if there was no belief there, does there have to be a belief attached to thoughts that are being experienced to recognize an emotion? It was just sensations. There was just nothing. And I'm wondering too whether there was no suffering. Absolutely. It was just to watch the play, you know. So yeah, it's just a sharing. I know it's no. What you were saying last night? It's I don't know, there was a theme you were saying last night, and I thought it was really, really great.
Where nothing means anything.
Yeah. It doesn't mean anything. That's fine. Yeah. So
you're gonna, you know, when you've worked through the emotions and you've contemplated and you've really, you've really gone deeper into that, then all that's left really of the remnants of this great story of that I think I've been through, is the kind of the muscle tensions, the ways that those familiar stories have affected my body, this body, and you'll notice kind of aches and pains and tensions coming out of sometimes out of the energies, just frequencies that need to be released. You've dealt with the thoughts and the emotions more and more, and as you keep drilling down into what the core of this I is, it's really just a lived entity that's lived inside the body as a bunch of tension and muscle contractions, and those start to sort of energies that just as they lift out of the body and our openness, we can suddenly have some thoughts and emotions that go with them as this energy is felt, this frequency is felt. If there's some old remnant of something, it will stimulate some thought temporarily, but there's more and more of a sense, as you so beautifully said, it's just like coming home. It just, okay, I'm next, look at me now, and I can come back, and it's just a queue outside the door of old unwanted energies that we couldn't deal with, and then just to look at, and accept, and one by one they just come back into the wholeness of your being, and the energy that we had spent suppressing them is freed up to just come back to peace, and there's more peace from that.
Yeah, because there was I stayed just watching in this space for a while, and it was just fascinating and beautiful to watch the movement of the body, and just total. There was no pain. It was just sensations of all parts of the body moving, and the more I honed into like even to the muscles, and it was just beautiful. So and like you said, there's no finish, and I did really like that. I'm thinking, well, that's really great to know that there's nothing. It'll just keep doing whatever it does and get more beautiful, and nothing to push away, but just to allow.
And this is why the sages have, throughout the ages, they've done the physical asanas of yoga. To the real yoga is union, but also the physical postures are designed, obviously, to help stretch out the muscles and release these tensions from inside them. But you'll find your body does that anyway. I'm not saying don't do yoga if you feel a pull, but you might find your body twitching or shaking or hiccuping or laughing uncontrollably or crying. It knows what it needs to do to release these energies anyway. It knows how to get to allow them to move, to release.
Well, during this, I'm going to embarrass myself now.
It's the day for it seems, yeah.
In the Satsang intensive, every time we had a break, because I was getting a really built up of energy in the body, and so every time we had a break, I went outside on the lawn, because the grass I don't know how, but it just tends to help it. And I went out in the grass, and I just found myself like doing this, almost like this tribal African woman, and making noises, but I just really went with it, and I don't
shrieking and wailing and like a whirling dervish.
Yeah, it was just really moving the body, and but
amazingly, I found cleaning my house really helps as well. Who'd have thought? But you'll find whichever way you might just feel suddenly to go for a really brisk walk, get your heart pounding, get the energy moving or something like that, but you'll know exactly, so it's standing on the grass bare feet is just, it just earths this energy back. It can just flow through.
Each time it just sort of stopped that build up, so it was great, but I just found the whole body wanting to move and shake, and so it was great. And then a beautiful sleep, and that waking up to seeing that I could actually allow, it was so wonderful to go, oh, well, what else is there? And it's just, it was so beautiful.
It moves from when is this going to be finished to, wow, this is so much fun exploring the corners of my being and bringing these things back into wholeness. Now there's less and less to suppress and more energy freed up. It's very nice.
Yeah, so thank you very much. I look forward to the next one. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Kate?
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing? Nice to meet you.
Good, yeah. Nice to meet you. I've been here for since you were on Awakening Together, Satsang. I've been coming to your Satsangs and following your teachings and just getting so much from them. Thank you so much.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and today was just wonderful. I had this insight of when you were reading about the about that, when that question came in of, is this it? Is this all there is? And that was the question that started me. Like before that, like this was about 14 years ago, I was an atheist. I wasn't on a spiritual path. I was, it was not.
I was an atheist for a good long while. You might find that hilarious now, but
yeah. I've heard you say that before. Yeah.
It's quite funny looking back, but it was some despondency at the idea of God or whatever that I was being presented with, and you can probably identify with that yourself. It's like this doesn't feel right, It's not wrong. It's just it didn't fill in all the answers, Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Carry on.
No, it's good. But just what I got today was that question, when it came in, I saw so clearly that it wasn't a question to Kate, the person.
Mm-hmm.
It was a question to, the self. It was a call to reality, that, and that was just so beautiful. It's like as I see the the construct of the person being dismantled, it's weird because like I see it in the past as well, like I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but it's like it's being undone everywhere.
Yeah.
In the story, and it's just amazing.
It kind of it starts like, I remember I was scared of this question for a long time. Is this all there is? I didn't even want to really entertain it in case this was all there was. But in the end, I just had to find out, right? All right, if this all is all there is, and I'm going to cease to exist when this body goes, let me find out. At least I'll know, and I won't be wondering, And obviously, you discover so much more. But yeah, that question was just born out of desperation, I think, and but it starts to undo everything, doesn't it? It kind of gets in the personal eye and begins to chew away at the wires and things that hold it together.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I'm really looking forward to dissolving the ego.
Are you joining us in the course? Lovely.
Yes. Yeah. So
fantastic. Well, lovely to meet you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Too.
Thanks for sharing. Okay, Ian or Maggie or both?
Seems we both have a question.
Okay.
I've sat on my question for quite a few days. It started when I was listening to the Wholeness Direct interviews with the students and recognised how different the seeming stories seem to be of how we got into all of this. It's a question I asked you many years ago when I was suffering, and I've sat with it. I sat with it all through the intensive yesterday, knowing that if it was going to be asked, it would be asked. It's been asked now. It will be in a minute. But it was, why am I asking it, was what I was looking at. Why am I asking the question? Anyway, the question is, and it's perfect for you reading the story of I, which I absolutely love. Why?
Can you be a little more specific than that?
You want a concise question, so why?
That's a little too concise.
When I listen to people's stories and how they got, let's call it, into it, some people have been searching for years and years, and then there was others like myself who just had such a.
Well, you weren't even doing this. You came to support Ian in his awakening. That's the only reason you turned up to your first satsang, wasn't it?
Always. But you know, it is quite a funny story, but it also was brought out of absolute desperation of suffering. And I asked you this question when I was suffering: why do we have to find ourselves? Why? And I can look back now and know that none of that happened. It seemed to, and it's very distant.
Oh yeah, it really seems real.
And it was, and there's a lot of people who will feel that they are really suffering now, and sometimes you hear something and you think, wow, but it's like, why do we have all these different ways of finding ourselves?
So you're asking, why is everyone's pathway different?
Just why do we have a pathway if we always knew that we were self initially, and we become a person, or we believe we become a person? And I just wanted, and I have sat with it. I sat with it all day yesterday. Why am I asking? Why am I wondering about this again? Because it's coming from a very different place now. From why do I have to suffer, and why do I have to go through this? I'm just wondering why. But it's been so beautiful as well. I've got to say that it's I don't want to focus on the negative of it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ian.
I will do my best to I'll hopefully answer the question, but if I'm off track, let me know.
Yeah.
There
may not be an answer.
There's, why all this journey, really, I think is what you're asking.
Yes, yeah.
And there's two answers to that, and both of them are true. And the first one is there never was a journey. None of it has ever occurred. And also, simultaneously, that which has never journeyed is expressing itself as an ever-unfolding parade of forms and appearances, and right from the first single-celled amoeba up until human beings and whatever exists on other planets, who knows? But in the manifestation, in the way it's appearing, it's on this journey for more. It's constantly life, the source of life. Nothing is happening. Life itself, everything is happening, and it's unfolding, becoming ever more conscious of itself. First, it was only conscious of its environment through these amphibians, reptiles, fish, all of that, and then it became conscious of others around it in primates, and began to develop family groups, and then still it wanted more. It was still curious for more, wasn't it? It wants more self-awareness, more self-recognition. This sense of I is on this endless journey in the manifestation to discover itself. Even in spirituality, it's more clearer recognition, more faster self-awareness, clearer students, clearer teachers, simpler teachings, faster realizations, greater understandings and epiphanies, less and less time for it to happen. It's just always on this drive, isn't it, to and even there's generations being born now that don't even seem to really need to get caught up in ego for very long at all, in an earthly lifetime, before it goes, you know what, that's a bit small, I'm just gonna step out of that. So it's just, in one sense it never happened, and in another sense it really did happen, and it really is wanting to understand itself. And it seems opposite, it seems paradoxical, but it's the shapes that the self makes, the forms it appears in. It's always on this evolutionary process, which will continue long after human beings have gone. Whatever we evolve into, from the very first cavemen that began to experiment with lighting fires and things like that. Now we have the internet and all this technology. It's just going to be even faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the why in the manifestation was for the joy of it, for the seeming forgetting and then remembering of it, and then realizing it never actually occurred.
Yeah.
And then coming to respect both of those perspectives, most importantly, that both are true and both are the same one, expressing itself different ways.
Yeah,
So I didn't really answer the question there,
no,
but
you have. I didn't need an answer, but it just kept knocking. Why? I thought, well, I'll ask it. But I didn't, when I asked it last time, I needed to know why I had to suffer, why things had to be so bad. And now it's just so not in our remit, is it? It's very different, and it's thank you. I just it wouldn't go away, so I thought it needs to be verbalized. But
it's kind of probably answered. You've answered what my question was going to be, I think, really.
I'm good, aren't I?
You're really good. Spot on.
2 for 1.
Because yesterday when you were talking a lot about suffering, I was kind of, there was something still kind of like irking me a little bit about the way things are for some reason. Why do people have to suffer and all this kind of stuff? And then when you read, every time you read from the story of I, it kind of like all the questions kind of go.
Yeah.
But the only thing that I always find kind of always comes up, I always wonder, I know the absolute can't actually think, but I always wonder if...
And it can think too.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any conclusions, does it?
Yeah. I always wonder if it kind of thinks it went a bit too far with creating humans, so, because they really all get lost.
God sat up there going, "Oh, I screwed up with this one."
I always think that, because everything else, like a tree is quite happy being a tree, and animals are quite happy chasing each other around.
The whole self-realization process is being able to identify as that which has no self-definition. That's right now, isn't it? There's a certainty here that I can't define myself, and that's a kind of identification in a way. A certainty, a conviction of knowing what I am is indefinable and indescribable.
Yeah.
And not only you can only arrive at that with a capacity to identify in the first place. So the first way it does that is as I am this separate being only. This is all I am. And then obviously the story of I goes through the stages of discontentment with that and then coming out of it. So it's a necessary thing. It's not a mistake. I have to identify as the body to come to experience the oppositeness of that compared to what I actually am. And only then through contrast can I go, well, that this cannot be all I am. So the capacity to identify as something, or particular ways we identify as either the human being only or the self or all of the above and none of the above, it is a process in itself, isn't it? With which Sage is just as identified, really. They're just totally identified as anything that they could possibly identify with. Like, I'm a human being and I am the formlessness, and neither of those are really true for me. Doesn't make a lot of sense, probably, but
I still wonder why, like a tree doesn't go through that kind of process. Does it? A tree is just a tree
because it can't think about itself.
But why
Thinking, delusion only happens on a level of thought. Maya, illusion, delusion only happens in thought. Before a human body appears, there is no capacity to get identified.
Yeah, I got you. Okay.
So when it appeared as a human being, it could begin to think about itself, and that was wonderful because it could compare and contrast and self-reflect. But at the same time, there's also the capacity to believe those thoughts and to really experience them then as reality.
So it's just a necessary part of...
It's happening, and it's never happened at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Clear as mud.
Yeah, I like clear as mud, it's fine.
I remember the stage of being so frustrated when you'd hear these paradoxes. Like, well, which one is it? You know, have I been on this journey or not? Yes. Well, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But if you just kind of inquire into that, well, what is that place in me where both of those are true? There'll be some opening there.
Yeah.
I can
Lovely.
think about myself as a human being, as an individual separate soul that I thought I was, as being on this huge long journey through many bodies. Or I can recognize the formless awareness self that's never changed. Both of those are just as valid. If we're excluding either one of them,
Yeah.
we'll feel incomplete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
stuff.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Megan? We'll take Bev's and Sophie's question, then we'll stop it after Sophie's. Hi, Megan. Can you hear us?
Hi, Helen. Yeah.
Hiya.
Thank you so much. The book is just such a beautiful, the story of I, or the book of I, so beautiful, and I could identify with all the stages, and some just like a momentary thing. And I really appreciated at the beginning how you talked about whenever we go into dualistic language, you know, there's going to be paradoxes and so on. I've had this experience where the language of separation, I can feel it crumbling inside me, but I don't have a new language to come to, whereas like when you speak, it's quite clear, but I don't, you know, like it's almost impossible for me to language my experiences.
I'm having that sense today as well. It's really not really working for me to language it today. You got to remember though that it's only where it's going to be a teacher it has to have that capacity to put it into language clearly. Most beings that wake up, it will never be interested in speaking about it. It's just realized and absorbed and lived quite happily, quietly, and you know, you go on about your life, so to speak. It's only really where it's going to teach that there is a capacity in that particular mind and body to try to describe the indescribable.
Okay, I guess the impetus has been, I felt this really deep pain because I felt like I'm giving, when I speak, I'm giving all these pointers to the limited self, right? And I'm hurting people a little bit. That's how I felt. And I hurt myself as well. Like, and so why not give pointers to the unlimited self? But, you know, I just had a deep pain that I'm hurting, you know, myself and others by pointing to the limited self and playing the game of the culture, you know, that I'm, you know, trying to fit into the culture and be accepted. But it's, yeah, I mean, I don't feel that pain right at this moment, but there was a, you know, that's what I experienced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite often, I felt for a while like I was being inauthentic when I would, you know, go to the supermarket and end up chatting with somebody about something. But I realized that authenticity I wanted was to be authentic inside myself. And sometimes that authenticity may express itself as still as a separate being because the person I'm talking to might not be ready for or want to even know about any of this stuff that we're looking at in Satsang. So there was a little adjustment period to recognize that that is their truth at the moment, society, and that most beings on this planet are not even remotely interested in finding out what they actually are, you know, and they're still enjoying the sense of duality and the sense of being someone, you know, and really that is a deeper honoring of my own truth, that I am everywhere, and I can also honor my experience when I'm showing up as a human being who's really deeply caught up in a separation still and doesn't even want to get out of that I can be, it's not lying to myself if I speak to that person as if I am a separate being. You know, to not do that would be too shocking for them or too scary for them, just completely inappropriate as well. And at some places I can express myself as the ultimate truth, like here now in this conversation. So you just kind of you realize it inside yourself first, and then there's a settling into, well, yes, the rest of the world also still believes in separation, and a lot of people just aren't even interested in this and won't be for some time, and that's completely okay. You know, it's as long as we're being true to ourselves inside, that truth will express itself in whichever way is appropriate for the next being that you encounter.
Okay, I can kind of, yeah, I can relate to that in that, I mean, I enjoy a dream, you know, I enjoy a dream and other people enjoy dreams, and so I can relate to the infinite self enjoying its dreams in this appearance and other appearances.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if someone else is enjoying their dream and really being in the dream, why not let them have that?
Yeah, exactly. And that is the deepening of love. You know, I respect you enough to respect your experience. Whatever your experience is, I won't try to tell you you should not be experiencing life this way, because when it's ready to wake up, it will. And if it's not ready, it won't. You know, and there's nothing in between. You know, there isn't really any separate being getting in the way of that process. There never was. It's just ready to stop dreaming when it's ready. And, you know, who am I to say, you know, you should not be thinking? Of course I tried, like everyone else. You know, the first family get together after I'd woken up, I tried to tell my mom and my sister and everyone, you know, that actually I don't exist as a separate being. And I could just see these, you know, sort of shutters come down, and I was like, oh. And it was a real shock for me that nobody else wanted to know. You know, they just knew I was into that weird spiritual stuff, and they were happy that I was happy, but they did not want to know. And that was a real shock and an adjustment process, because you sort of realize, you go, and then you go on this right, I need to tell the world now, I need to tell everyone, let me phone everyone and tell them that they're not actually a separate being. And surprisingly, that doesn't always go down too well.
Yeah. Thank you.
But it also makes us value the connections we have with other beings that are valuing this, you know, that we make in Satsang and in the Sangha groups. And it makes that so much more important and valuable, I think, that there is someone to know that we're not the only crazy one that suddenly doesn't want to dream anymore. You know, it helps.
Yeah, thank you. I hadn't realised there was an Australian Sangha group, so I'll look into that, and I'm looking forward to the dissolving.
If you contact Savitar and Vidya, if you're on Facebook, there are on the website helenhamilton.org, there are lists of the Sangha groups there as well, so it'd be good to connect with people there as well, and we're all on the same path. And the Sangha groups are so important. I can't emphasize the importance of those connections enough. They'll really help you, all of us. It's the same oneself learning through all bodies, isn't it? So the more we talk about this and share the challenges of it, the easier it becomes. Lovely. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to Bev.
Hello.
Hiya, how you doing?
Good, good. And yeah, I have to do that too with the Sangha groups. I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent.
And thanks, Megan, for asking that question, because sometimes I do feel like I have a foot in two different worlds. Like I'm at work, and as things are changing for me, I kind of feel like, who am I with this person now that I've been interacting with for the longest? You know, so that really helps. I just wanted to share, just some of the experiences I've been having since, doing the Dissolving the Ego course. I've been experiencing, like I've always, I guess, kind of see my spiritual journey as something that I have to do, and I'm having the experience of just things, just happening in me, like less judgment. Like my ego feels like I'm seeing less differences, and having my opinions are like they're dissolving a little bit, and it's like I like the self has always been here, and I'm having experience and sensations and certain things happening, and even when they pass, I kind of feel I can still feel, I guess, the self. And I can feel my ego saying, this is gonna, this is temporary, this is gonna disappear, and it's not, and so this is, a new experience for me. And when I'm sleeping, what I'm realizing is sometimes recently it's a different type of sleep. Like I'll almost come to, and I can hear, it's almost this, it's not a conversation, but it's almost like the self asking questions and answering it. And this is happening on such a level where I'm like, did I sleep last night? Like,
yeah, I totally get that one.
Like, I'm like, am I not getting any sleep? Because this is like ongoing, and so, and I wake up and I feel like really buzzed. It's just the weirdest feeling. And
because you're not sleeping, right? You are not sleeping, the body is, and you start to catch it. There's times I would just be like, I'm just watching this process of the body lay down, and the breathing slows down, the heart rate slows down, and there's just a sense I'm still here. And not that lack, that discontinuity that we experience as a separate being. And then the mind's kind of got this time to kind of sort out and rearrange all the epiphanies we've had during the day and digest them, and there's all this going on one level, isn't there?
Yeah. So I just wanted to just share that there's this, I guess, this undoing that is happening that I'm not doing, kind of thing, and it's awesome.
I was going to ask you that just out of curiosity. I know the answer, but it'd be good for everyone to hear. Is it this scary, horrible thing, this undoingness that the ego says it will be?
Not at all. Not at all. It's hard to describe, but it's definitely not scary at all. It's good.
For me, it was like being in a hot air balloon and just slowly rising, and each one of these things that got undone was like this ballast that got thrown out, and the more got thrown out, the faster you go kind of upwards. You're not really going anywhere, but metaphorically. And then all of a sudden there was just this very speeding up where it just all got chucked out, and it was glorious. This kind of tried to describe it in the first chapter of the Gita book that I wrote, but it's not at all scary. It's actually you kind of get excited with the process. You sort of, wow, what else is there to let go of? And it speeds up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just this exploration. It is exciting. Yeah.
That's a really good word, exploration of my own, the recesses of my consciousness, and see what we can dig out. And I appreciate you sharing that, because it's good to, sometimes people just kind of go quiet after they've had this deepening of seeing, and that's fine. But I think we need more voices to also say, this wasn't the scary thing my ego said it was going to be. And not just a teacher saying it. It is really, really helpful. It's wonderful to hear your progress as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Lovely. Okay, we'll go to Sophie. Yeah, how are you doing?
Thank you so much for today, and for everyone sharing. Gosh, it's just what you were saying about the Sangha. It's so beautiful.
I'll just jump in there and say anyone can attend any Sangha anywhere from the world, even if it's the Australian Sangha. Anyone can join it. That's why they're at different times, you know, so don't feel that you have to wait for the US one if you're from the US or etc. So sorry to interrupt you.
That's good. So, you know, listening to the story, there's this huge expansion of, you know, it's so kind of beyond the, you know, that you kind of go with the journey to the beyond. And I know this question is coming back into the personal, and I don't want to be stuck in the mind with it, but it's this really, you know, to look at what your life is presenting you with in your experience and to reflect upon it with wisdom rather than, I mean, I'm dealing with, you know, right now, I don't know if it's a place to explain a circumstance, but just to give the idea that within certain, I see it as certain family patterning or conditioning that is being called to the light in quite dramatic ways, which it has to be engaged with. I can't just, I've tried the last 2 years just to sort of allow it to be without actively engaging with it, although it is working within my system. But there's this knowing that I'm being called to have to address it, and it is, you know, it's all dealing with death and money and family, old, you know, whatever, the kind of darker side of relationships within that, and it's all this, how to reflect on that in a way which brings the wisdom of the knowing, rather than, because sometimes I feel like if I respond, it's going to be mixed. It's going to have some egoic, but that has its place, you know, because there is a personal response to the situation, as well as a kind of knowing that this is a part of me, that I'm not blaming them, I'm not in conflict on that level. Yet sometimes, you know, like that sword of Kali, you have to kind of say, you know, this is what's gone on and this isn't right, you know, and bang. And then, you know, things will kind of fall as they do, you know, and the consequences of that are what they are. And I've held back doing it. I've done it a lot within my journey as facing certain things, and I was trying not to do it anymore, but I really feel like
it doesn't work so well, does it?
This might be the last stand and the last time I need to do it in this context, and I'm on this precipice, and I really feel that, and so I'm really sorry to use satsang in that way, but I just wanted to see if I could relax into a knowing about the reflection of your life in its real
perfect way to use satsang. It is really, you know, one of the highest questions is, how should I handle this? You know, how should I move with this? Because our ego assumes it knows anyway, which isn't wrong, but it does, and it isn't always obvious the best way to work with something when it's coming up, the best way to look at something. And that in itself is the birth of wisdom. Maybe there is a even better, not that I'm making the way that I've done it wrong, but maybe there is even better way to look at this, to handle this. Maybe there's more to see than I've seen about this. And just to give that space to be able to, I may not have seen everything there is to see about this. And I can allow all the different ways. My ego will look at it the way it always looks at it, and I'm going to see if there's anything else that wants to reveal itself from this. For me, that was a really helpful, just to decide not to decide how to handle something when it came up. Because at first, like, right, anything pops up, I'm going to ask, is it really true? And then other times I'm going to sit with it. I was really sure I'm just going to sit with it and meditate on it. And then I'm not going to do anything at all when it comes up because it's not real, And so in the end, I thought, actually, why don't I just wait and see what wants to happen when something arises to look at, and it might be a deep investigation, a day where you're just obsessed with a question, or it may just be a sense that something's going to be revealed from this, or it may just become intensely felt and then lift on its own, and the wisdom of the self is always knows the right way. We might not know what that is in advance, might just sit and cry, or we might laugh, or all of the above, but the question that helped me was what wants to be revealed out of this, what wants to be seen, what wants to happen here. And just that openness immediately makes you feel better, but you're not going to miss anything then. There's a knowingness, I want to use this as part of my growth and transcend it finally. And I don't want to miss anything of this opportunity that's happening. Can you get a sense like that? Yeah. So you could just ask, what wants to be seen here? What's really happening right now? What's being shown to me, or something like that. I'll just, and that's a never-ending process of exploration, as we were saying in the previous question, the previous share. You can just open up and see what wants to be revealed. They might be many-layered.
Yeah, because it's like the same thing that's come again, and within the family dynamic. So it's really this yearning to address it in a way that is going to meet it in its rightfulness, and so it's kind of.
So maybe that's the question right there. What's the highest way to meet this right now? Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing. And just you have that power inside yourself, just to ask that question. It has to be resolved, released. Just that wisdom is already inside there. Well done. Thank you. Lovely. Okay. Right. We will leave it there for today. Thank you for joining me today. Powerful, powerful questions and sharings. Thank you. Namaste.